Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James, and here I like to explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. And today we are exploring the world. A viewer named Arindham contacted me not that long ago about a pen bought on a recent trip to India, and this is it. This is the Pierre Cardin Pneumatic, and it is a pen that uses long international standard cartridges and has the little push-me-pull-you converter. And for this style of pen, an unusual nib that we have seen in some other pens. Arindham only paid about 80 rupees for this pen, which I understand is somewhere around $1, give or take. That's a really good deal. And I think you'll find it's an especially good deal as we look at this pen. So let's spin that camera and get started. All right, first things first, the pen does come in this blister pack. Very simple. It is, again, the Pierre Cardin. It is the Penomatic. I'm covering that up there with where I tore it. The Penomatic Deluxe fountain pen. It doesn't say anywhere on the pen or on the packaging what size nib it is, but it is a round nib, and I'm going to call it a fine because it writes very similar to some Western fines that I'm writing with right now anyway, and so it was a good comparison that way. It does come with two international cartridges. These are the international longs, which we really don't see all the time as much. Shorts have become much more commonplace than long, so holds quite a bit more ink. They say up to about 3 times more ink. I haven't tested that on any international longs, but that sounds about right. Now on the back you have how to fill the pen and different features of the pen, which does also include that converter. And you know I always like that, and I always have to ask if they can include a converter on a pen that they paid for 80 rupees, which is a discount from the 100 that's on the MSRP here on the package. Then what is the excuse when you're paying for a pen 100 times that price? The answer, of course, is there ain't no excuse. Anyway, I move on. I haven't gotten on that soapbox in a while, but it was there and it was tempting, and you got to hear it. Anywho, let's look at the pen. So I would consider this similar to any other school pen or an office supply pen. That's kind of the construction, the materials, and the design of this pen. So that's the way that I am going to approach it in this review. So that means that it is injection molded. So the finial, of course, is an injection molded dimple there, and the same at the bottom of the pen. In between, you have a stamped steel clip with the Pierre Cardin signature, and pretty stiff. It's a stiff clip. It will hold your pen in place for sure. I have put that to the test, but it's not all that springy. I would say, since this is a thin plastic cap, don't push that too hard, or you might have an issue, as would be true of any pen similar to this one. So nothing particular to this pen, just in general. If that thing's too stiff when it's plastic, a crack can occur where it does not belong. So just be careful there. When you come down the cap, you will find grip section. Yes, the cap has its own grip texture to make going on and off just that little bit easier. I found that the seal is good. Now, I haven't tested it beyond about 3 days, but after 3 days, uncapped, it wrote just like it should. No issues there. On the barrel, you have again the Pierre Cardin script, and you have the name Penomatic and liquid fountain pen, as opposed to all those solid fountain pens that give us so much trouble with their stubborn feeds. Anyway, that all again looks fine. It's the aesthetic of, say, a Pilot Varsity. I would put it right in there on aesthetics, although with a nicer metal clip. I also have found that its performance is very similar. And I'm a fan of the Varsity, so that tells you something. You got that same matte silver finish while we're talking Varsities. Of course, being a plastic school or office pen, it posts securely. It is very light, as you'll see in the specs here in a little bit. And so it is perfectly balanced. That's the nice thing about inexpensive plastic pens like this, is they usually are pretty well balanced and nice in the hand, and this is no exception to that rule. Now, if we look down the cap, it is just that plastic cap. There's no extra sleeve down in there, but as I said, I'm not having any dry out issues. The grip section is nice and long. It's a little bit narrower, but will remind you by feel of, say, a Platinum Preppy, which we'll compare to this here in a second in our size comparison. That feel is very similar, but you've already noticed what is different about this pen, and that is that it has a tubular nib. And this is the style of nib that normally you'll find in a hidden nib pins. So very similar, probably swappable, I would bet, but I don't know. I haven't tested it. Try that at your own risk. But very similar to, say, a Jinhao 51. Now, the Jinhao 51, for the longest time, was my go-to $2 pin. This was the very first one that I bought, I believe, and I love the transparent green of the grip and barrel. Just a fantastic pen, but these are getting thinner on the ground. I don't know if they've been discontinued and it's just warehouse stock, or if just thinning before a next run. I don't know if any of you know. I'd sure like to know. But this is one of my favorite inexpensive pens, and it is a great penabling pen, but it has the same kind of tubular nib. And then I've got a complete brain fart. That's what I've got. What is the name of that pen? Meister by something. I'll put it up here in text. My brain just completely froze. Pen I got on Jet Pens. It's a Japanese fountain pen that uses also a tubular nib and a pen that you wouldn't expect to find it. So, as I said, we've seen that kind of a nib before, but mostly on pens that aren't anything like this. Looking at it up close, you can see it is a very narrow nib. Again, it's got a round tipping point, and it is, I believe, a fine. Then you can see that narrow feed, which does a good job keeping up, as you'll see in the writing test here. All pretty straightforward, functions well, and the pen writes, I think, well above its pay grade. Now, as we open up the barrel, we will find that included converter, which is also branded Pierre Cardin, and works really well. Now, y'all know that this is not necessarily my favorite kind of converter, but I don't hate them. It's just not my favorite, partly because sometimes you might need to flood that nib a little bit after a dry out or something, or in a pen where you're doing some flex writing, you might need to prime the nib. And these are risky when you do that. When you push the little slider down, sometimes it's stubborn, and then the next thing you know, you push too hard and you got a mess all over your carpet. It's not a good idea to make that kind of a mess, but this one really worked flawlessly. I've had no leaks or problems like that, and it was an easy fill. All right, for our size comparison today, you have the Penomatic next to a Platinum Preppy, and again, I think these pens are right in the same market, but the Penomatic is beating that price in its home market by a long shot. And then the Jinhao 51, I paid for this $250, something like that, a long time ago. I think that might have even included postage. I believe they're at least double that at the moment, so certainly more expensive. And then from my local Dollar General, the Zebra fountain pen. Now this one is disposable. That's what's different about it. But they all kind of compete for the same type of writer and for the same kind of needs, and certainly bring different aspects to the game as they do. And then as you can see, it's quite competitive in size to these other pens. A small nib did not mean a small pen, just a different approach. And in fact, when the pen is capped, it is the longest of the bunch. All right, let's see how this thing writes. Penomatic, and again, I am going to call this a fine. These tubular nibs usually don't have, not much line variation at all. That's to be expected. Ink today is, can you see it? Can you see it? You already know, sharp-eyed folks, what kind of ink that is, right? Or at least the maker. That's Private Reserve's style. And that big wide-mouth jar, you feel like you're putting a pen into a mixing bowl of ink. And what is it today? It is ebony purple. If you were watching the other day, you might have seen that coming. I mentioned in the review of the Baroque Caviar that I was kind of itching to write with this ink after I compared them and saw how different they were. Check the pen for wetness. I think that's pretty good for a fine. About right smack in the middle of normal, right? You will notice there is a little bit of audible feedback. It is not scratchy. It does have just a little feedback. To me, it's the comfortable kind I kind of like. I've not had skipping problems with this pen, but I haven't done a speed test, so I'm curious to see how that goes. And if you expect me to solve that one on my own, good luck, because I don't have any idea. But we do love our Greenlander, Icelander, and Irish friends. Now let's try the speed test. As I said, the pen has been great writing. I've really enjoyed it. And it's always fun when you find a pen that writes really well, even if you would just say that it's not, anything spectacular, because it's a normal nib. But you could also put it up next to a pen, 100 times its price, and it writes just as well on paper, even if it doesn't have, luxury presence. Not all pens need to be luxury, and I would argue most don't. This pen's meant to be practical, even if they do use a Pierre Cardin name. It's meant to be practical, and it very much is. But let's see. I've talked a little bit, so hopefully we didn't dry out the nib here. Let's do our speed test, and we'll do this again in real time. All right. I lifted. Perfect. I lifted right here. And it was like a big lift, more of a bounce. But no, that kept up very well. And that jives with my experience with the pen. So Arindham, thank you so much for sending this pen. I have really enjoyed it. And I appreciate you thinking of me in the channel and people who might want to know something about it. We do have a lot of viewers in India, and so this is going to be something that maybe will help some people that watch this channel the next time they're at the market looking for a good, reliable, inexpensive pen, which, for me, this has been, and Arindham says, same thing in his experience. But what about some of you who have used this pen? What's your experience been? Share that in the comments below. And to what would you compare this pen? I compared it to the Zebra fountain pen because I can go down to the dollar store and get this. I don't remember if it's $1 or $2, but it's somewhere in that window, really inexpensive and available. The Preppy, I probably bought this back when they were $3, which they are not anymore. Usually find them to be $5 or $6 nowadays, making this definitely the value champion if you can get it in your market. And I would say, I think it compares pretty nicely to these pens. I would take it over the Zebra, and if I'm looking for a fine nib, I'd be fine with it instead of the Preppy. Although I will say, the 0.5 Preppy medium nib, that thing is a ringer in a cheap pen. But what do you think? Share all that in the comments below. I hope that we are kicking off a good week in your life. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next review.